Good evening and welcome back to 31 Horror Nights. It's October 4th and tonight's movie is Soft and Quiet. This is a 2022 psychological thriller directed by Beth D. Arujo. I'm probably butchered that, I'm sorry. Anyway, yes, female director, love to see that, and this is her directorial debut, and it was very ambitious because this movie is being presented in real time. Real time is what it sounds like. There are no time skips. Everything is playing out at the same speed that they would play out if you were in the story. And while this doesn't necessarily mean you need to make it look like it was all done in one shot, that certainly does contribute to the real-time feel of it. Some famous examples of real-time in movies are Rope by Hitchcock and Birdman by Alejandro Iñárritu. Aside from being difficult to execute if you're going to be doing a lot of long takes, also just from a top-down perspective of the story, people don't usually want to watch scenes that go on for even 15 minutes, let alone an entire movie. The audience is going to get bored a lot easier. The pacing is a lot harder to make feel realistic. So just on the basis of that alone, this is a very ambitious movie. I found out about Soft and Quiet because I saw a YouTube video talking about an aspect of it that I don't even think I should say during the intro because it might be considered a spoiler. Maybe it's going to be like Goodnight Mommy, where just the fact that I know that there's something I might want to look for is going to make it a lot easier to find. I don't know. The plot seems to be pretty vague. It's like a girls group, but it's like a bunch of ladies and they're like meeting, and I think it has like a PTA or like community advocacy sort of thing to it. I don't know. But things go south, apparently. This seems like a pretty interesting movie. I'm going to go give it a watch. So it turns out my concerns were unfounded. There was not some blink and you'll miss it plot twist reveal at the beginning of the movie that I got spoiled at just by seeing the title of a YouTube video. And the title of the YouTube video was When the Movie Gives It All Away in the First 10 Minutes or something like that. That is not the case. It is impossible to miss what they were trying to tell you at that moment. And this happens so early and is so important to the plot, I don't even think it needs to be put in the spoiler section. The big reveal, like 10 minutes in, is that this meeting, this group of women meeting up, is because they're all white nationalists. The terms white nationalist, white supremacist, neo-Nazi, alt-right, they're all kind of used interchangeably. And while I guess all of these could arguably be applied here, I'll settle on white nationalists. They talk about wanting an ethno-state. They talk about wanting to get all the non-whites out of their country. And the way that they first revealed it is so bonkers to me. You start out following Emily, the main character, and she's like bringing like a pie to this meeting, and you never see it. But then, like, when she actually gets there and pulls the tinfoil off the top of the pie, there's a swastika carved into the crust. They kind of try to play it off as a joke at first, but then you see that the name of the group they came up with has Aryan in it, and you realize, oh, that's what this is. So yes, now that that elephant in the room has been addressed, this movie was actually executed pretty well. I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10. There were some problems here and there, but overall it was very effective. I didn't know exactly how much they were going to lean into the real-time part of it, but it is shot and edited to look like it was all done in one continuous take. This movie had to have been exceptionally difficult to record because not only do you have a bunch of takes that last like 5, 10, 20 minutes at least, there's also, the sun, and this takes place during the evening, so the natural light had to be in relatively the same part every time they do a new take. So, like, if they don't like the way a take turned out, they're gonna have to wait until the next day to try to film it again. Apparently, this was all done in 4 days. That's very impressive. Normally, one of the issues that you run into when you're doing really long takes is that it kind of just feels like the camera is waiting for things to walk up to it and do something. For the most part, the set direction and cinematography was done incredibly well. They also definitely segmented the parts into what feel like different scenes, even though by definition they're not really different scenes. They'll start at one location, then they'll drive somewhere else, and you follow them in the car and you hear them talk, and then they're at a new location, then they'll go to another location. This worked fine enough until like the very end of the movie where it did kind of just feel like things were dragging out a bit. I'm pretty sure in the final card trip, one of the characters asked, "Are we there yet?" And I kind of heard the unspoken thing is like, the movie can't continue until we get there. Real time, I'd imagine, is meant to increase immersion, but The situation and characters in this movie are alienating as hell, so that doesn't really happen here. I guess in this movie it was sort of done to do what they did in Late Night with the Devil, where you see the situation develop and you see the character dynamics change. When you compare the way that these characters are acting in like the safe place, this meeting towards the beginning of the movie, and at the very end when they've dug themselves in such a deep hole, the dynamics change. One of the characters in particular reveals herself to be a lot more ruthless than you would think initially. There was a moment with her that actually like gave me chills. And while I normally don't want to run towards political discussions for these videos, I do want to point out that it was very interesting watching the meeting because it sort of showed you how people are dragged into extremism, how people get radicalized. Because you see the different types of people that these movements draw in when you look at the different members of this group. Some of them are obviously just hateful, racist people. Some of them are just unsatisfied with their lives, they're easily jealous of others, and they found a group of people who will say, no, no, those thoughts that you have in your head that anybody else would say are a problem, that actually means you're smarter than everybody else. You're right. And some of the things they talk about really illustrate the way that extremists will take genuinely moderate, reasonable positions to have and act like what they believe is this sort of natural extension of that. Some of them were probably a lot more moderate at some point, but they were probably caught at some bad point in their lives and they fell down the rabbit hole. I do have some problems with the movie's pacing. It really does drag towards the end, but overall I thought it was a pretty well executed thriller. It has some great acting performances, and it was very interesting. Even if there were some scenes that are very uncomfortable to watch, I can't even imagine how uncomfortable those would be to film. But I guess that's the price you pay when you make movies that touch on subjects like this. Overall, I would recommend it as long as you know what you're getting into going into this. And now I want to talk about some spoilers. The meeting gets cut short when one of the people, this meeting takes place at a church, and I guess somebody who works at the church sees it and then tells them to get out. But he tells this privately to Emily, so she kind of plays this off as, hey, let's take this back to my house, let's have some wine. So she's part of a group of 4 ladies that break off from the other ones, and they get into an altercation with these 2 Asian women at the store that one of the white women work at. And going back to character development or character dynamics changing, one of the ladies at the meeting was like, oh, I don't really know why I'm here. I don't really run with this crowd very often. But I guess in the next few minutes of getting like hyped up and encouraged by the women around her, she seemed to delight in taking a much more active role in being racist towards these Asian women. Things flare up a lot, and for some reason, the ladies, the white ladies, the racists, they decide to break into their house and do stuff. In the process, they also drag along Emily's husband, and I don't really know if they were trying to go for he doesn't agree with how they view minorities, or if he does, and it's just a lot more pragmatic, but he clearly didn't want to be taking part in what they were doing. He was the only one who at all seemed concerned about, like, well, what if we get caught? This is a felony. He definitely wasn't innocent. He was complicit for a while and did even help them. But there was a point where he just sort of threw his hands up and said, I'm not helping you with this. I'm leaving. And then he just walked off. And you can tell that the rest of the women, except for arguably one of them, is just used to never experiencing consequences for their actions because they just kept doubling down and hyping themselves up. That was until things started to actually go wrong, in which case they turned on each other immediately. That's when one of the ladies, Leslie, sort of reveals herself to be pretty scary, actually. She was the one who came up with all the ideas of how to cover up the things that they do, because they do accidentally murder somebody. They tied up the Asian sisters and, like, duct taped them to chairs and, like, force-fed one of them trail mix, and she was apparently allergic to peanuts, so she was going into anaphylactic shock. They act like they want to get the EpiPen and save her, but it feels like Leslie really took her time to do it. And when she comes back, she says something like, well, it looks like it's too late for her now. And the way that she said that, that was the moment that, like, actually kind of spooked me. Then the rest of the movie is them trying to dispose of the bodies, and that was the part that really dragged out and felt like it just went on for too long, especially with how dark a lot of it was. But silver lining, it's revealed at the very, very tail end of the movie that one of them is not dead, and she, like, swims up to the surface of the lake because they dumped the bodies in a lake. And then the movie ends, but I'm going to assume that she would go on to tell the police what happened. Overall, once you get past the flashbang that was the swastika pie, this is a very interesting psychological study, especially with the idea of how, like, racists and extremists justify the way that they feel and the things they do in their minds. But with most of the characters, there was a point in this movie where they just thought, how did we end up here? This movie is certainly unique. I can't think of any movie that this really reminds me of. If you're interested, I'd say check it out. All right, thank you for listening. I'll see you tomorrow.